That Triathlon Show 312. Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to another episode of That Triathlon Show, the podcast presented by scientifictriathlon.com. I'm your host Michael, and on today's episode I interview Rick Velati. Rick is a national coach with British Triathlon's world-class program, where the ultimate goal is to achieve Olympic medal and gold-winning performances. Prior to this current role, Rick spent almost 12 years as the head coach of the Great Britain and England talent program under British Triathlon. We will talk about things like Rick's coaching and training philosophy, long-term athletic development, and coaching youth and junior athletes in this interview. But before we get into that, big thanks to our sponsors. First, we have Precision Hydration that create electrolyte products that you can match to how you sweat, and fueling products that make it easy for you to hit your numbers. When it comes to electrolytes and sodium in particular, remember that we all have different sweat rates and we all have very different sweat sodium concentrations. So for example, for me personally, I lose more than 2000 milligrams of sodium per liter of sweat. And on the bike in a race, if I sweat around 1.5 liters per hour, which I would do in a hotter summer race, my aim being to replace at least 70% of what I lose, I would need to consume at least 4,200 milligrams of sodium just on the bike in a 7.3 distance race, depending on how fast or slow the course is. But on the other hand, somebody who loses 500 milligrams per liter and just sweats 0.8 liters per hour would need to replace a lot less, about 8 times less, in fact, for the same duration out on the course. Precision Hydration's products and free online sweat tests or advanced in-person sweat tests makes it easy for you to figure out what you should do when it comes to electrolytes. Use the promo code THATTRIATHLONSHOW15 to get 15% off your first order on precisionhydration.com. And big thank you to Zen8. The Zen8 indoor swim trainer is a swim training tool that you can use at home, allowing you to improve your technique, work on power and stamina, and save time and stay consistent. It is a fantastic way to work on swim-specific core activation because the instability element of the bench forces you to stabilize your core, and it helps you to work on a high elbow catch because the height of the swim bench is perfectly designed for forcing you to keep that elbow up. You can get tips and specific workouts to use on the trainer through Zen8 social media channels like YouTube and Instagram. The Zen8 swim trainer is very affordable, and even more so with a 20% discount code that you can get on zen8swimtrainer.com/TTS. If it helps you get more consistent with your swim training, it might be one of the best investments that you can make. Now, without any further ado, let's get into the interview with Rick Velati. Welcome to That Triathlon Show, Rick. How are you doing?
Morning, Michael. Yeah, very well, thank you. Yeah.
Can you start by just giving the audience a bit of an introduction to yourself, who you are, and what is your background in triathlon and in coaching?
Yeah, sure. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Rick Velati. I work for British Triathlon. I got in triathlon really from sort of 98, 99. I came to Loughborough University to study English with a passion for football. I didn't really know much about triathlon back then, but I really found my way into the sport via coaching opportunities, and I very quickly became involved in coaching the student club. That's where some of my friends that I met at university were, and that coincided with meeting some good people in the sport of triathlon. And I had a desire to get involved in teaching, which is how I ended up going into coaching, not classroom teaching. And so this is, going back a good few years. But for me, it's important because it really has set up where I am now. And around that sort of time in Loughborough, there was the first phases of the junior program were being created in British Triathlon. And a guy called Dan Salcedo was in Loughborough. And I really just started, working alongside him with the program, coaching the student club and being involved in the early national junior program. For me, then, it was a real good opportunity that there was a coaching apprenticeship role that was available with involving British Triathlon and Loughborough University. So I successfully applied for that. And really, for the next few years, had opportunity to work alongside the national programme while coaching Daytoday in Loughborough, and from there, my opportunities have all existed within British Triathlon. I went to Wales for 4 years to again work alongside Chris Jones and Mark Jenkins, Helen Jenkins, and other athletes down there in Swansea. And then really the main bulk of my career, I came back to Loughborough after the Beijing Olympics in 2008. And I then took on the responsibility of the talent programme, youth and junior programme in British Triathlon, based up at Loughborough. And that's a role that I really did through until pretty much when the pandemic started. My role was sort of subtly changing the back end of 2019 to become much more involved in the under-23 programme. So I'm kind of now in a position where my role is a national coach within British Triathlon. I'm not a guy who's on the coalface every day dealing with athletes, but I'm there in a national capacity, and I kind of thinking of how to describe. I'm kind of like a grey area coach. I'm not like working right at the top, and I'm not working right at the bottom, but in this kind of middle zone of working with athletes from sort of 18 through to their mid 20s, with the different changing structures they have around them, and it's a role that I really enjoy, and that's kind of how I've got to where I am and where I am now.
Yeah, that's a really interesting backstory. And so you didn't really do triathlon yourself. You just got involved through the coaching opportunities. Is that correct, or did you do some triathlon yourself as well?
I did one triathlon. I did the university's Olympic distance triathlon. I think it was in 1999. I was again a guy on it. Just did it on a mountain bike. It was a pool swim down in Bath, 40k on a mountain bike, and tried to hack out a 10k run off my football playing fitness. I just really enjoyed the challenge, and I really just enjoyed the people that I met in triathlon. And as I say, it was a point in my life when I was 18, 19, like classically not really knowing what to do. But I had a real thought that I had a real interest in, kind of what English was my chosen study, but really to get involved in teaching. And I loved sport. Obviously, I love football. I was never going to be a football player. And so, I really fell into triathlon. And I owe triathlon a lot of debt, really, for the opportunities that it's provided me with.
Yeah, that's really cool, and I think we have a lot in common there. I also loved football and played that growing up, and I was also never going to make it as a football player, and then fell into triathlon instead somehow. So yeah, that's funny. So you've been with British Triathlon now for many years, and you've seen many Olympic cycles from your role within British Triathlon. So can you discuss the great success that you have had overall when it comes to Olympic performance and World Triathlon Series and so on? There must be something that you're doing right over there.
I think. Yeah, there's obviously there's a lot of depth now. There's a lot of depth in how I think sport, but how British Triathlon have got to where we are. I think there is clearly a lot of global success that is seen, and there's a lot of athletes across a number of years who've contributed to that, as well as obviously great infrastructure that we have with day-to-day training opportunities, medical support, a really healthy domestic sort of competition structure, as well as the growing international one. But I think my biggest sort of thoughts on this are I really do believe that we're British Triathlon, we aim to be good at learning. So taking experiences right back from even before Sydney, and the Sydney Games, what happened there that then shaped the sights on the next Olympic Games. And there's things like, in Sydney, for example, we had great experience with someone like Simon Lessing going, and youth Tim Don making his debut there. And I think that through that next cycle, into Athens, there's even stories there with what did we learn from, just injury management. Weirdly, I was living with Paul Amy at the time. We qualified for the Athens Games, and then sadly, injured himself beforehand, and he missed out, and Mark Jenkins came in. the kind of the story around Athens is, you've got a guy, Mark, who on the biggest day, it didn't go well for him, but he's still got the desire to pick up his bike and the mechanical and the attitude that, the characteristics that he had to do that shape then what we then begin to see for us as a federation through Beijing, where we had a real mix. We had Tim there at his third games, and we had Helen and Holly Avel and Alistair and Will Clark at their first games. And I think that was the sort of the change, which I say I think it all links, because what we've learned is, I think if you invest and you try to really invest time, not just money and resource, but time in youth and junior development, that the athletes, they're really exciting. They're really exciting. And what we're then beginning, what we've seen then through the last few games, obviously, is we've seen the career of Alistair and Johnny, which is obviously incredibly well documented. But I think that, what I'm trying to say is that the athletes that have come through, they've really created a lot of momentum through each game cycle. And I think that being able to focus on the Olympic Games as they come round is a real strength of the athletes and a strength of the federation that we're able to do that. But I think also along the way, there's for all the successes, there's athletes across Olympic Games who, not everyone gets a medal at the Olympic Games. But I think that what has happened with us is that there's so many athletes, great athletes, competing athletes, that there's a real sort of healthy competition to push the standard in the sport. And I think that what's happened through this kind of timeline is that the standards in the sport have been raised. Some of them, some of it clearly by our athletes, and some of it that's probably inspired other athletes from other countries to push on. And I think that we're at this really great point where we've got, some really exciting young athletes who are breaking through onto a world stage. But I genuinely think that is also built on the success and also the challenges of athletes that have gone before them. And I think obviously alongside all that, the athlete cohort, we've been able to build, healthy coaching structures. We've got good opportunities to provide a lot of coaching and medical support to athletes through our programs. And ultimately the intent is that helps athlete development. So that's kind of the intent and why I think that we've been able to be as successful as we are.
Yeah, you mentioned there just the depth of talent and athletes that you have. Is that from the outside? It looks like it is a depth of talent, like a real rich depth of talent that you have. But is that the case, or do you think that you are perhaps just also really good at developing the talent that you have? Do you see actually at the grassroots a larger influx of triathletes than many other countries your size might have, or do you think it's a bit of both maybe?
I think it's a bit of both. I don't know the exact numbers across other federations, but I certainly know from my interactions with particularly a lot of the European countries that for example, we would have 400 youth and junior triathletes come and attend our national, call it a selection weekend, if you like, which is traditionally in the early part of the year, maybe April time. So we know that there's a really healthy body of athletes that are wanting to do triathlon in their teenage years. And I think that, as I mentioned, we've got the opportunity to provide across different regions coaching support for those athletes. So there's a desire to keep a wide net, if you like, that we're not just trying to cherry pick 10 athletes that we perceive to be they're the next best athlete. I kind of think that no, it's more keep the net wide at the younger ages and provide coaching opportunities for athletes to develop in. just support them along the way. And, kind of you get these natural pinch points in athlete development for different reasons across, teenage years and then junior to senior and, going to university or moving from home, going to training centers or whatever, that kind of there's almost a slightly natural self-selection on who wants to keep pursuing triathlon at a high level. And I think that our role is is definitely to support, a manageable number of athletes through their teenage, youth and junior years, and just work with them to support them. And then as they, as the best ones, if you like, if they come through, then they've, we've probably worked with them for a number of years before they've arrived at that point.
Yeah. So would you say that if you can support more youth and junior athletes, even if it means everybody gets slightly less of the same pie, maybe they can't go to as many training camps or as many races, but you can support more athletes with basic coaching in their hometowns, in their home regions, you would choose to support more athletes, generally speaking?
I think, there's definitely the guys. There's definitely a capacity of how many can be supported, at a regional level. But it's definitely in double figures. It's not trying to sort of just have 6 from a large region. It's kind of, as you get towards the national camp level, then the numbers get smaller. But I think there's definitely a way to support more athletes, across the regions, which then obviously nationally, then we've got a big catchment of supporting athletes, and we've got a good idea on what the context of the athletes are at different ages and stages.
Mm. What do you think the culture of triathlon is like in the UK, in Great Britain? We're hearing about how like Alistair Brownlee in particular with his golds, and the Brownlee brothers in general have really made such an impact in the public eye that, as opposed to many other countries, everybody actually knows what a triathlon is for one thing, and then secondly, perhaps even somebody like Alex Yee saying that he took up triathlon being inspired by the Brownlees. Do you think that in the UK triathlon is just more established now than in many other countries, and it's much more of a sort of normal thing to do, and not just a fringe sport?
Yeah, I think it's definitely. I mean, we're really lucky that I think the characters that do triathlon at the highest level, they're brilliant people. They're good role models. They're accessible to people. They tell good stories about the sport. As I say, I think everything that Alistair and Johnny have done in the sport is there for everyone to see, and they've been brilliant for growing the sport. And I think also, just going back to the previous bit, the impact of a home games, London Olympic Games, across the sport generally was massive for us in Britain. But people more recently, you're seeing Alex and Georgia, who are, if you like, currently they both are, are silver medalists from Tokyo in the individual races. But I think that they're, as I say, they're accessible people. They're really good people. They'll help others. They'll communicate well. They've got a really healthy just philosophy on sport and pushing their limits of their sport and enjoying sport for the right reasons. And I think that's the culture that we've got. I think across our both the male and the female sides of the program is, look, sure that there's competition for places on teams, but there's a real ethic there of hard work, of being grounded, of being, as I say, this accessibility. I think in the modern age that those guys, like through the pandemic, we ran a load of calls, Zoom calls and connections for teenagers, the youth and junior programs, because they had significantly more restrictions on, they couldn't swim, for example, whereas obviously elite athletes could. But those guys, across the whole program, not just the two I mentioned, they all gave their time. And I think that ability for the culture of them, putting back in, helping the community of triathlon, not just in performance, but in the grassroots, in the the different strands of the sport is really healthy for the sport. So I think the culture that is seen through the characters on the world stage is really healthy, and I think it's really, a lot of it is really down to how those guys operate as senior professional athletes in the sport, and it's really good.
Yeah. Now let's move on a bit to your sort of personal views on coaching and development, and if we start by just you describing a bit more about your general coaching and training philosophy, how you view it, what are kind of the main tenets, if you will, that you think are important?
I think, on a coaching philosophy, I think it's really back to coach the person first and the athlete second. I think that's something that I maybe not always get right, but I think to stand by something that you've got to really try and help the person, and the technical elements of being a triathlete sort of fall out of that. I think that how I believe in trying to build relationships with athletes, and I think I can only do that by trying to again develop a good, open, honest relationship with the athlete. When you put in front of them, or when you meet them, or for the first time. I think that it sounds a bit holistic, but I genuinely think that I've found you can't get the buy-in with athletes if they don't know that you're really interested in them and care about them and what they're going through to progress. I think that's something that I've learned really through spending so much time with youths and juniors, that they are at under 18s. They're always someone else's child or someone else's kid, and I think that level of responsibility that you take on as a coach, I always remember that, which is why, from a philosophical sense, there's definitely a duty of care to the athletes, almost regardless of their age. That I try and put foremost in my mind as a coaching philosophy. And kind of on a training side of it, I guess it's linked to that it's kind of health first. I think that's something that has definitely grown more clear to me over the years, that a healthy athlete physically will always have an opportunity to perform. A healthy athlete mentally will always have the opportunity to just think clearly, be happier, be more content in themselves, have more self-confidence, have more self-esteem, and how those characteristics are developed in an athlete is as important as the training, the physical training. So kind of, without sounding too wishy-washy, that's kind of where I am from a philosophical point of view, and almost beginning of a training point of view as well.
And as some examples of how to ensure that you keep your athletes healthy physically and mentally, can you just name a couple of things that you either do, or just a couple of maybe potential pitfalls that you need to avoid to ensure that is the case?
I think certainly one thing is intensity management. I think that hear a lot about they need to be doing a good amount of aerobic training. Obviously, that's key factor of our sport. But I think it's so easy across 3 different sports to be pushing too hard. And I think if you're only doing maybe one discipline, you can get away with that as an athlete. But across 3, if you dip in, go too hard too often across perceived aerobic work, you're just inviting just too much hormonal stress, too much fatigue that kind of isn't really obvious at first, but a week, 10 days down the line, you're suddenly very aware that the athlete is more fatigued than you kind of think they should be, and again you're just losing training time from just over pushing simple aerobic work that should be kind of easy to manage, easy to do, relatively stress-free, but done too hard, it just can invite too much fatigue, and it then ends up compromising your harder sessions, which are going to be done anyway, but then you're going into those harder sessions already with a level of fatigue that doesn't need to be there. So I'd say that that's definitely one thing that I've learned more about. And the other things, particularly with this at this age of athlete, that I say I've spent most of my time working with directly or indirectly, is just the overall load of what they do. The schoolwork, the university work, how sleep and rest are at times completely compromised. And those simple things that, well, we think they're simple, but if they're not recovering properly, normally eating properly, resting properly, and sleeping properly, then you're already really, really compromising your basic immune function, never mind trying to take on 15, 20, 22, 25 hours of training a week. So those are the things I'd say definitely, just learn more about how to keep athletes healthy.
On the intensity control side of things, I'm interested, how do you do that with younger athletes who maybe aren't as aware as more experienced athletes about what easy means and what is not easy anymore? Do you actually at a pretty early stage instill some sort of quantitative measures like heart rate zones, or how does it work?
I think that the heart rate zones, and of course now, on the bike, power has become a lot more accessible. So again, I'd say it's definitely very much athlete for athlete. Like it's again back to what I said about relationships and trying to, not just through me, but through the structures that we have, trying to find a better way of supporting athletes and educate them. That I think basic understanding what does easy feel like. There could be a metric on heart rate, or it could be a metric on pace, or it could be a metric on literally just an RPE scale, like how hard out of 10 or how hard out of 20 is this, and you want to make sure the majority of your work is kind of a 3 or 4 out of 10. Like any higher than that, you're going into that middle inviting fatigue sort of area. But I think in those, the harder balance is protecting the hard sessions that that a lot of athletes, younger ons, they'll be in club sessions where you as a triathlon coach may not have direct control over. So you kind of you are at times reacting to what's happened, which is why it's even more important to protect the recovery around sessions, and also protect any aerobic work that's in the athlete's program to really make sure that it is, as I say, just really easy and it protects those hard sessions. And I think as the athletes, generally get older, what tends to happen is you end up having more control or more influence over those quality sessions through the week. So I think the education and the knowledge around how much and how hard the hard sessions are becomes more clear. But it's certainly tricky for a good stage of really trying to get that clarity on how hard are the hard sessions and how easy are the athletes making the easy sessions. It's a really tricky stage, that.
Yeah. And what about the other aspect of just the overall load and stress that you mentioned, with sleep, with schoolwork, and so on? Is that something that you just have to have a conversation on a regular basis with each athlete individually to get a qualitative view of that? Because I guess that handing out POMs and DALDA scales to younger athletes is not necessarily something that is easy to do on a very frequent and regular basis.
No, I think it's a good point. I think that in my experience, it's certainly with the younger athletes at home, it's conversational, in that it's just trying to just work with them, and particularly the parents as a key influencer. That if it's only possible for an athlete to get 8 hours of sleep a night because they're getting in from evening run club or evening swimming at 9:30 at night, and they've got to be up for early morning swimming at 5 a.m, then you're just really aware of these pinch points. So it's really just trying that sort of stage to work with and educate. Sounds really patronizing when you're going into sort of telling parents what you think about their day-to-day routines, but there's really obvious pinch points in young athletes structures, shall we say, with school and clubs that they have, that you're just trying to literally look at where the real risk areas here and trying to put support around them. It's easy, like, they can now report on, on Training Peaks and things like that, and how much sleep they've got, so you can definitely track it. But I think it's more also conversational, that you're just trying to help just educate them that if they're wanting to do this amount of training on a consistent week in, week out basis, then there's going to be pinch points in the week. Recovery needs to be really valued. Things like sleep, as well as, good meals and stuff are really important.
Yeah.
So I think it's just that support and education, really.
It's an important point that about also talking with the parents, because you might talk to an athlete and they might understand what you're saying and maybe even agree with it. But then if the day-to-day rhythm at home is such that it's difficult for them to actually, let's say, go to sleep early enough so that they get enough sleep for the early morning swim, then it's just implementing it becomes a struggle. But if you then can have parents help reinforce the structures around it at home, then it becomes much more likely to actually happen.
Yeah, I think that's definitely again, as I say, the intent with kind of what we've tried to do through British Triathlon is, and with the number of the coaches that we have at regional level, and trying to reinforce nationally that athletes in their home environment, they're going to be there again, in our society, probably up until at least 18 with their A levels, and then do they stay at home or do they move? So you're at a key point in your athletic development, 16 to 18, where you're trying to put in a good amount of aerobic training in amongst what's probably a structure that's heavily club based, and it's a really challenging period of athlete development, and also just the young person's development with school structures, exams, all those pressures, as well as trying to probably qualify for national teams, qualify for European and World Championships, perform at those championships. So you're just recognizing all these stresses and how to stay healthy, how to stay healthy and give yourself a chance at being near your best on a start line it's a real challenge. And that's why I think, to go back to what you're saying about the desire to work with the parent, it's more just a desire to understand the athlete support network and their support team, kind of as early as possible. Because, you recognize in say my kind of role, you're not there every day, you're more detached, but it's kind of a responsibility of the national program in my sense, that you're trying to reinforce healthy messages to athletes to give them the best opportunity to develop, and that will involve a lot of people at particularly those younger ages. And so you've got to be prepared, or in my opinion, definitely got to be prepared to work with a number of people and work through a number of compromises to really help the athletes have the opportunity to grow.
And in terms of the development arc of the athlete, when we talk about long-term athletic development and things, how do you view that arc from in your role in British Triathlon in general? Can you explain that at a high level?
I think what we're seeing is, I think we've got to be, as coaches, more open to a whole range of development profiles that are coming into our sport. There could be some fantastic swimmers from a swim background who haven't ridden a bike, who might run a bit. There could be fantastic runners who swim a bit but not enough, who maybe ride a bit. There could be some exceptional bike riders who swim a bit and run a bit. And I think that what I think where we are now is, what we're trying to do is just, particularly through the challenges of the pandemic, where swimming's been compromised for a generation of athlete, really, is just look at different strengths, different development profiles that are coming into the sport. And like I say, just trying to find a way of supporting them, give it time to develop, give it time also to address the weak areas, or the areas that need to be improved, to give them a chance to, progress in the sport. But I think there's a real range of profiles we're seeing now.
Yeah. So would you say that are things becoming a bit more individual with the runner who maybe swims a little bit but not that much have quite a different program to the swimmer that runs a bit and bikes a bit, or and is that something that is changing or has changed more recently compared to perhaps in the past having been everybody follows the same program no matter what the background is?
I think yes, because I think that again, individually, particularly focusing on young, say younger athletes who are based at home, the biggest thing that I think that the athlete needs to do is to maximise what's around them. So if they've got a fantastic swim club or swim group that they can access, for example, then you want to see them maximise that and take that as far as they can, rather than sort of thinking that to be a triathlete I only need to swim 3 swims a week in there or 4 swims a week in there, and then I can balance the rest of my program. Another athlete might be living in a situation where there is a fantastic opportunity to access, a triathlon program that is, if that's coached every day or most days, then that's the best decision for them. So a lot of it will come back to maximizing what's around them, which is kind of why I say I think that what we need to be a lot more maneuverable, just to support the development of athletes as we see them, because they all will be different. But the idea, the philosophy is to maximize each individual with what they've got around them at younger ages, and then you get to a stage where obviously it becomes a lot clearer what are the areas of development that need to be improved. But I think if you try and really address that too early as a triathlete, then you might end up just cutting off that development range that might end up being an athlete's real super strength. But being aware of that.
Yeah, that leads nicely into the next question that I was going to ask about, which is how you view compare early specialization compared to developing a large range of skills, I guess skills and abilities at a young age, and how do you think that is potentially changing in triathlon as well?
I think the biggest thing I think that's changing is it's kids are doing triathlon at a younger age. So definitely having clearer sort of technical models, particularly across the specifics. Really, there's more demand for open water swimming, for example. So you sort of go down that route of how can we develop a generation of just more confident open water swimmers who are more confident in that environment. Which I would say that wasn't as clear, say 10 years ago. And it's the same with bike riding. Just a number of conversations across with different coaches would involve a clear technical model for cycling, but also for confidence in packs and cornering skills and dismounting skills when you've got 10 people around you. And I think the skill set that an athlete now requires is on one hand it's very, very similar to what it was a few years ago, but I think that as a coaching community, we are just a lot more aware of those technical aspects that need to be addressed at an early age, and the same things with in running technique, having just clear idea on a technical model that you're working towards with an athlete. That you want to see progress.
Do you think that the access to starting triathlon at an early age is a big advantage compared to what used to be the norm in the past of coming from maybe a swim or run or even a bike background into triathlon? Is it a big advantage, or do you think you can still have as good of a chance of making it in triathlon even if you do just swimming, let's say, for a pretty long time into your teenage years?
My personal opinion, I'm pretty open-minded on this. That I think that's where it's great for the sport that it's got to this point that it's definitely more accessible. There are more kids, more teenagers, more young people doing triathlon. I just think so much of it is the messaging of us as coaches. Like if you've got an opportunity to, as I say, really develop. You've got a real strength in running, and you've got access to competitions in athletics or competitions in swimming. Then I think it's just all back to how you've got that relationship with the athlete and manage that development, that you don't want to cut things off. If an athlete's got a clear strength, desire to do triathlon, but also a real strength and desire to compete at high levels in individual sports, then I think, it's definitely about not cutting those opportunities off. And there's so much that you can learn from those athletes doing those activities as well.
Yep. And how do you view talent and talent identification? I mean, that's something that obviously you have to do when it comes to selection and for programs and for races. What are the main things that you're looking at within British Triathlon in your talent identification process?
I think that we've definitely really looked at that, and I think there's the physical side of talent, but that's kind of where we've got to. Is that talent, or is that just speed? And is talent more of a mental attribute that is more of a psychological trait to do the work, to really persevere through tough times, to have a long range view on things? So it used to be called a talent program, but we changed the language to be across our development, to be just next generation. So it's not a focus on your the message not being you're talented now, you've been identified. It's kind of like, it's just bringing it back to, you've got opportunities to grow in the sport, and we're going to support you. We feel like we know certain standards of performance. What does top world youth performance look like? Well, it's we're pretty clear on that. What's the standard of world junior performance? We're pretty clear on that. I say pretty clear because it'll always change year on year out, but historically, we can reference performance markers across athletes development, athlete journeys. But I think the talent where we are is we're just seeing more and more that it's about how an athlete will persevere, stick with things, have that mental fortitude to overcome the tough times. And that's what I think we're trying to message through through coaching and the coaching profession, is that it's not just about identifying perceived fast kids and that's it. I think it's more, there's more to it than that, and it's providing a safety net for athletes, providing that emotional support, as well as the physical knowledge that says, look, at certain stages there's probably a bandwidth of speed and a bandwidth of general aerobic work and a bandwidth of strength that you're going to need to do if you're looking to develop as an athlete and perform at different stages as you go through. But I think the real talent is just how the athlete takes on that work and takes on the challenge. And I really believe that long-term perspective and the long-term self-drive and self-desire is as much the talent that you're kind of looking for at a young age, as well as what you see in swim speed or bike competence or bike speed or run speed. It's kind of, which goes back to kind of this, what I was saying about trying to get to know the person and find out what are their drivers, what are their motivational drivers, why are they taking up this challenge of triathlon, and is it healthy? Is it mentally healthy? Is this psychologically it's a good thing? And I think when you're a bit clearer on that direction mentally, then I think the physical side of it is easier to engage them with.
Yeah, that's quite similar to what Adil Tveiten of Norway said on the topic. I think he paraphrasing a bit, but for him, talent is basically being able to train a lot, but also being willing to have the desire to train a lot and not just train a lot, but to actually improve and go through that process of improvement. And I like that rebranding from talent program to next generation. It's a very sort of classic going from almost like a fixed mindset to a growth mindset branding there.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
And then one question that I have as well on the topic of youth and junior development is, we talked about a few already, but are there any other sort of common issues that you see that might prevent optimal development in these age categories?
Yeah, I think one thing that I haven't talked about at all with any of that is I think what I've learned is it's got to be fun. It's really it's got to be fun. Those years, those teenage years, it's got to be fun, and it's a healthy balance of fun and focus. That age and stage, they're so exciting. They're fearless. They don't know what they can't do, and I think that's our role, is to try and nudge them and push them to find out, like, what can you do. And I think you can definitely do that by creating, environments where you can have fun. They can just express themselves, and at times when it's requiring focus and attention, and that's to do with their goals, their drive, they've got a license to completely do that. Because the challenges just mentioned there, I mean, obviously there's the whole pressure, with everything in their life at that point. As I said, school exams, high performance competitions, growing sort of expectations of others, this age of social media, and different things coming in that weren't there 10 years ago. I think how the coach or coaches or the coaching program works with those young people to support them is really, really important. And I think that work cannot be underestimated with coaches working with youth and junior athletes, because the other physical side of things is, of course, all the growing. Athletes grow, they become less coordinated, going through different stages of puberty. There's a lot of frustration with changing performance levels, and I just think, there's so much going on in those ages, and I think that's really what I've learned, is not to underestimate anything that's going on, in those ages and stages. And things like, things that really hurt athletes are not getting selected for things, and how that is then picked up with the athlete and probably their parents and other people is really important, because you're trying to manage frustration, and you're trying to manage failure a lot more than success in those developing ages. So how you, as a coach, handle dealing with perceived failure and frustration and injury is way more important than how you handle an athlete who might win a medal at a championship or something like that. And I think that, I think that's so important.
Yeah, I bet that you can lose a lot of potentially really, really top level athletes if those failures aren't handled properly. And other than that, do you have any other pieces of advice that you would like to give to coaches of youth and junior athletes, or even to parents, if you have anything on that side?
I don't. Yeah, it's funny. Giving advice feels very patronising. It's almost advice to myself. From what I've learned, is just to be patient. It's really just classically not to look at a youth and junior career as a youth and junior career. It's literally is just the beginning. And I think many of the athletes that I've worked with, as I say, directly or indirectly, will often remind me that, of course, you want to do your best all the way through. There's a philosophy. You're not trying to not do your best. So if you win races or you get success as a youth and junior, that's great. But it's just the handling of the context that is so important. And I think when I mean the patience, it's the youth and junior is you get athletes who are successful, and you get athletes who aren't successful. But whether you're successful or not, it literally doesn't matter if the philosophy is that everything you're doing in that window of development is to prepare you for what's coming next, out of juniors into that, under 23 area. It's just a category. You only race under 23 twice a year in a championship. So you're basically a senior. And what goes with that, I think, as I say, mentally, is there's all changes. Like you could be out of education. So you're incurring debt from university stuff. You might need to start self-funding what you do if you're not on a national funded program. And I think there's all those stresses that come in. So being clear mentally as a person, what are you trying to do from triathlon, becomes really important. And physically, those stages of development, if you're trying to develop a clear robust technical model across swim, bike, and run that enables you to take on the kind of load and training volume that you need to sustain week in, week out to be a successful athlete, then all those years across youth and junior is just preparation. And I think really, trying to get that message through that, end of juniors is just the beginning, and it's a platform that you might have some great racing success, and hopefully athletes do. But even if they don't, you've still accrued, probably, hopefully 20 to 30 decent racing opportunities. So in terms of, skill development, an understanding of race environments and understanding the technical side of your sport, every race you do is a great learning opportunity, and really trying to capture your learning through each of your race opportunities, capture your learning from a training point of view is so important. And I think, just to re-emphasize the learning aspects of particular youth and junior development, and focus on the process, not the outcome, is advice that I'd certainly reiterate, and I would re-give back to myself to remind me.
No, that's a great message. And switching focus a little bit now to amateur triathletes, and typically we would be talking here about adult onset triathletes. Of the things we have discussed here with the development of younger athletes, are there any things that you think are also pertinent to the development of adult onset triathletes that we can kind of learn from this development process?
I think, just regardless of age and status, elite or amateur, clear goal setting is one that that's very obvious. That I know that's not a physical thing, but just being clear on what is it you're getting ready for, what do you want to achieve, and work back from that. And the other side, which is similar, is maximize what's around you. Maximize what you can do on a day-to-day basis, and that your training rhythm, training routine, with what an amateur triathlete has to them with work schedules or whatever they do. It's just to maximize the opportunities you have to train and recover in a sustainable way. And I think that's a message regardless of athletic status. And the other side of it is, again, more of a technical focus, that technical with, again, intensity management, that you can always have clear technical goals with whatever session you're doing across swim, bike or run, and equally having good idea on what intensity, what speeds, what paces, what zones, if you like, are you setting about training every day. So having a clear purpose with what you're doing in each session is equally important, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, those are all great tips. And we're coming towards the end here, so just a couple of sort of general and fun and interesting questions for you as a coach. What would you tell yourself from 10 years ago if you could go back in time?
Two things, really. I think keep being curious. I think never stop asking questions. And weird one is, you kind of in sport, you almost always aim for the top. You aim to go up. And I think I would remind myself, just you don't have to aim to go up. Not everything requires going up to Olympic senior level. I think that there's a place where coaches can really be their best, and not everyone is destined to fulfill that Olympic, top of the tree as it's perceived. I think that it would be learn to be the best that you can be in what you do, and don't be drawn by thinking that you've got to go to the top. I think that's a message that has become really clear to me.
And what is one thing that you're currently learning about or are fascinated by within coaching or endurance sport?
For me at the moment, the fascination actually it's a little bit linked to the pandemic situation. It's really thinking about how can coaches stay just mentally really engaged, and how can you stay mentally creative. We've seen so many stories of athletes having to do creative things with swimming and cycling, particularly online through the pandemic. But how you stay creative with what you do as a coach, for me as a coach, is really important. And what I mean is, like, being creative in this day and age doesn't just mean going onto Google and clicking in something. I think that the ability still to learn from others, but also just use your own mind and your own intuition is equally as important. And it's something that I'm definitely keen to keep thinking about.
Do you have any example of something creative that you've seen, any specific things maybe within one of the groups that you're involved with in the coaching coaching sense?
I think the obvious one for me is through the last year how many people bought pools to put up in their garden and do a lot of resisted tethered swimming, and actually how many people are still doing that within a normal, you can swim normally now, but you're still seeing people doing tethered swimming because it's really helped with some shoulder robustness or things like that. I think things that people have learned over the last 18 months about themselves or about their technical program that they keep doing now because it really helped them. But yeah, tethered swimming would be one thing definitely.
Yeah. And let's move on to the rapid fire questions. So take just one sentence to answer each of these. And the first one is, what's your favorite book or resource?
My favorite book is still Better Training for Distance Runners. It's by David Martin and Peter Coe. It's an old book, but I always enjoy referring to it I'd say it's the best book that I've read in terms of just clear physiological education. So I will always refer to that. It's around running, but you can apply it obviously to any sport.
Yeah. And what's an important habit that you've benefited from athletically, professionally, or personally?
Day-to-day consistency, and it's back to just that desire to be healthy. As a person, I'm no use to other people if I'm not healthy, and I think that's a trait that you see in athletes, the discipline to train consistently day in, day out. But I think that for me with life as well, just aiming to be healthy, consistent with what I do.
And finally, who's somebody that you look up to or that has inspired you?
The person who's probably had the greatest impact on my career is a guy called Chris Jones. He was head coach of British Triathlon a number of years back, and had such an impact on a number of athletes. Particularly the early 2000s, and well, he still does to this day across different sports. But for me, a really really key figure in helping me as a coach.
All right. So thank you for that, Rick. And I'll have a link in the show notes to your Instagram profile, which I know is your kind of social media outlet of choice. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience and your thoughts with us. It was a great pleasure to talk to you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Michael. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
I hope that you enjoyed that interview. As always, you can find the show notes on scientifictriathlon.com with links to Rick's Instagram and LinkedIn profiles, as well as related episodes. And I want to remind you that we have a training camp with Scientific Triathlon in Mallorca in 2022, the 26th of March to the 2nd of April. And we still have a few slots available. So if you're interested in training at one of the world's best spots for cycling and triathlon training and meet us Scientific Triathlon coaches, but also such a highly regarded coach as Frank Jakobsen, who is a past guest on the podcast, then check out our website and sign up or email me to get more information about the camp. It will be a fantastic opportunity to build some really good fitness, get some invaluable education, and just get to hang out with a bunch of like-minded athletes and coaches. Next Monday on the podcast, we have a really interesting episode on the physiology of skeletal muscle determinants of endurance performance. So that's one for all of you who are really into physiology and science. It will be a really good one. And finally, big thanks to our sponsors, Precision Hydration, that you can find on precisionhydration.com. Take the free online sweat test to get a personalized hydration plan for your next race, and get 15% off their electrolyte and energy products with the promo code THATTriathlonshow15. And a big thanks to Senate. Use the Senate Swim Trainer to improve your technique, power, and stamina, and increase your swim stimulus frequency even when you can't go to the pool or open water. You can get 20% off your order with the promo code that you can get on senateswimtrainer.com/TTS. Thank you, as always, for listening. Keep training smart and keep loving triathlon.